I got to use the microphone because we're streaming, right? Okay. Hey, thank you guys for coming out today for the joint SIOR Western PA Chapter and CCIM program on Delaware Statutory Trust. My name is Mike Downey. I'm principal at Avis & Young and executive committee member of SIOR Western PA. I would like to welcome the CCIM members who are able to join us here today. Really appreciate it. Dana, Dominic, thank you very much for all your help. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our annual sponsors. Without their support, events like this could not take place. Throughout the presentation, you'll see their logos behind me. We are looking to grow our list of annual sponsors. The ask is a mere $2,500. So for sponsorship opportunities, please contact our very own Executive Director, Kelly Shako, back here waving her hand. And then I'd like to thank our Executive Committee for all their hard work throughout the year. It's Kevin Riley from Totem Realty, Jack O'Donoghue from now Cushman and Wakefield. Congratulations. Yeah. John Billiak, Colliers Pittsburgh, Amy Broadhurst, Pat Sentner, CBRE, and Jeff Dietrich from Oxford Realty. And of course, Kelly Shako, our executive director, again, who is the guiding force behind everything we do. Moving on to today's event, our program features Troy Wada, who has traveled all the way from Hawaii to be here on this 35-degree day. No idea why. Troy is Principal Wealth Advisor for Impact Wealth Solutions and is recognized as being the top advisor in Hawaii for DST transactions. We are thrilled that he is gracious enough to share his time and expertise with us. Troy, come on up.
Thanks, Mike. I thought I would have bring the warm weather with me, but I guess it didn't work. Alrighty. Do I just advance the slides from the touchscreen? Awesome. All right, cool. Oh, this one? Cool. All right, that's awesome. Morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I just got in a couple hours ago, so I apologize if I'm a little jet lagged, but I had a good sleep on the way over, so I think I'm pretty good. As Mike mentioned, my name is Troy Wada, and my company is Impact Wealth Solutions, which I started back in 2013. But I've been a financial advisor for about 14 years now. When we originally started my company, we started working with the largest utility company in Hawaii, Hawaiian Electric. We signed a contract with their credit union to offer financial planning. So as you can imagine, I'm a registered investment advisor, which is the only way your clients can get access to a DST is they need to work with someone who holds a Series 7 and a 66 license. So our work started off in the financial planning space with organizations like the largest utility company in Hawaii. And then through that partnership, we started working with a company called Hawaiian Airlines. You may not have heard of them if you haven't been to Hawaii, but they're basically the largest private employer in our state. And then we do similar work for the Board of Water Supply on Oahu, the largest medical company, Queens Medical in Hawaii, as well as the largest telecommunications company in Hawaii. But over the years, what we've noticed is that in our client base of 1,500 clients, which keeps growing every single year, a lot of our clients own Hawaii real estate as an investment class. And I'm sure you folks know a lot of real estate investors. That's why you guys are here. And in Hawaii, the DST lends itself to our real estate market because we are in a real estate environment where we have highly appreciated real estate that may have been in generations for decades, lifetimes, ran out of depreciation, properties in which families bought real estate for like $100. And fast forward today, they're worth like 15 million, and it's just been in their families forever. How many of you ever saw the movie The Descendants? I know it was an older movie. George Clooney was in there. And the setting was on the island of Kauai. Any of you been to Hawaii before? Anyone to the island of Kauai? Huh? I love Kauai. Kauai is where I was born and raised. And that Descendant movie is actually a true story. Did you guys know that? It's based on an actual family that's out there. These people, these settlers came to Hawaii and purchased real estate from the Queen of Hawaii. And a lot of those properties are still in their family today. Now, the part about the cheating, and all that wasn't really true, but the fact that these people have huge real estate parcels on the island of Kauai, and they own maybe about 60 to 70% of the island, that aspect of that is true. And actually, those people are my clients on Kauai, and they own DSTs. Yeah, and they've been doing DSTs actually since 1992. If you're not from Hawaii, you wouldn't know this, but in 1982, the island of Kauai, when at that time I was 8, we had one of the worst hurricanes ever on that island, and that island was devastated in 1982. And then what happened in 1992? We had a hurricane that was even worse than the one in 82. Devastation again. That family realized that their real estate was not properly diversified. As you can imagine, all of your real estate holdings sit on the island of Kauai, which gets 2 hurricanes in 10 years and wipes everything out. So what did they do? Sold off some of their properties, diversified their real estate, and actually got into DSTs. With the company, if you look in your folder, Inland Private Capital, who's actually going to be at our symposium tomorrow, they actually still manage some of those properties for these families. So the DST has become, in Hawaii, this go-to exchange product, right? Where people who are sitting on these kinds of properties with highly appreciated values, running out of depreciation, getting very low cap rates, are looking for alternatives and why they want to sell their property. And that's why they come to us. So what is a DST? Simply put, the DST is the second version of a tenants in common. You folks all know the tenants in common structure, right? Anyone on the property, more than one person on a property, holds title in tenants in common. And in a tenants in common structure, you can have up to 35 investors on title to pool their money together with the intent to buy bigger, better property. Do you folks know why that number is 35? Any guesses? If that number was 36, it would need to be filed with the SEC as a registered security. So to keep things simple, right, they keep it at 35. Yeah. Now, what are some of the benefits of 35 people putting their money together and getting on title? You can buy much bigger and better property, right? But what are some of the drawbacks? The biggest is unanimous agreement, right? When people hold property, tenants in common, they all have to agree. You ever heard of instances where 35 people all agree to something? It's kind of difficult, right? But what else? The reason why these people have voting rights and they have to agree is because many times there's financing on the property. And whenever you have financing on the property, everyone holds title to the property, what ends up happening? All 35 people need to be approved for the financing. And all 35 people then become liable for it. That's why they're given voting rights, right? Now, the DST was born because our industry realized that there needed to be a better way. There needed to be a better way where people can pool their money together and own real estate. Yeah? And in 2004, the Delaware Statutory Trust was born. The Delaware Statutory Trust allows for up to 500 investors to pool their money together. So obviously, this is a registered security, right? And this is why you need to work with a financial advisor who can offer these products to your clients, right? But when 500 people pool their money together, we can buy much bigger and better stuff. So a lot of people don't know this, but ESPN, AT&T, Verizon, Zurich Insurance, the radiology department at NYU, each of these properties actually sit and reside each in their own Delaware Statutory Trust today. Yeah, and it's funny, driving out here from the airport, I noticed this huge white building with light blue trim around the top. Amazon Distribution Center, I assumed. Is that what it is out there? Is that an Amazon Distribution Center leaving the airport on the right-hand side? Yeah. There are many of them. Yeah. So in DSTs, we own a lot of Amazon Distribution Centers too. We actually just bought one in Virginia for about $200 million, right on the port there. So you can own now these types of institutional grade real estate. But what other benefits come with a DST? Well, can you imagine having 500 people agree to do something? It's impossible. No? So the DST does not offer voting rights. But for that reason, there comes a benefit, right? Number one is the DST needs to be managed in the best interest of all investors, not just one. But secondly, some DSTs come with financing. And because these investors don't have a voting right, and because they don't need to qualify for the financing, legally, they can't be held liable for the financing. So the financing comes in the form of a non-recourse loan. And all of you know in this room, because you folks have done 1031 exchanges, you know the number one rule in a 1031 exchange is you got to buy equal to or greater than what you sell, right? So you sell $1 million property, $500,000 mortgage, at closing, you got $500,000 in cash. But you actually need to go buy $1 million in real estate. You got to go get financing again. Many times with the DST and the non-recourse loan, we can replace the financing for your client without them having to go qualify for financing. They're legally not liable for it, and we can actually close the DST in about 10 to 14 days. Because what is the longest part in a transaction? Usually, the financing. Right? We eliminate that out of there, but because of that non-recourse feature, and because of some of the tax attorneys I work with, we came up with a strategy that is very unique only to the DST. And I'll show you guys this later today. And that's been a game changer for our clients. Now, Brian wanted to make sure I don't give all the secrets, in what we've been doing together, but don't tell Brian, I'm going to give you all the secrets today that we're doing, okay? Now, what are some of the reasons why our clients are finding this attractive? Number one, no management responsibility. Yeah, I like to say they get out of the terrible T's, the tenants, the toilets, and the trash. In Hawaii, we've been adding more T's every time I do a presentation like this. We've seen torching, we've seen TROs, we've seen all kinds of crazy stuff, but getting out of that day-to-day management has been a game changer for many of our real estate investors. Number two, they get access to institutional quality real estate. But number three, that limited personal liability, which comes in the form of that non-recourse loan. So they don't have the fiscal liability, right? But they also don't have a legal liability. It protects the investor against things like lawsuits, even repairs. If we need to fix the roof, if we need to repaint the building, they can never go back to the investors for any capital costs. It's not allowed in a DST. Once our DST is fully subscribed, example, we're working on a deal right now. It's a $240 million portfolio of 3 multifamily communities. One right outside of Denver, one in Florida, one in Livingston, New Jersey. Once we fully raise the $150 million in equity from our investors, we will close down this DST fund. Not another penny can come in. But that's why we hold reserve funds on every property. So if we do need to fix it, we need to repair the roof or fix an elevator, we never go back to the investors. And that's good for your clients because now what they did is they turned their real estate investment into just a pure cash flow, which is paid to them on the 8th of every month. The minimum to a DST is $100,000, but now your clients can truly diversify their real estate, not only by geographical regions like that family on Kauai, but also by asset type. Usually DSTs are asset specific. So we might have something like an Amazon distribution center, a multifamily, self-storage, blue chip office like an ESPN, even student housing. We actually have 2 privatized student housing apartments on Notre Dame's campus right now. Actually, we're soliciting offers for. It's a great estate planning tool because a DST, as you can imagine, is fractional ownership. What is the difference between fractional ownership and tenants in common? With fractional ownership, people don't have to agree. Yeah? So have you ever heard of stories where 3 kids inherit 1 property? Yeah? What usually happens? The fiscally responsible one wants to keep it rented, right? Keep getting his rent checks because it provides great taxable, tax-efficient income through the form of depreciation, right? The crazy kid who's the risk taker wants to cash out, pay the taxes, go to Vegas and bet it on black, right? But what about the third kid? Sometimes that kid wants to live in the property and not pay rent, right? Now, in a DST, when they inherit this, each of those kids can do whatever they want with their own interest, not contingent on what the other kid wants to do. So if that one kid wants to still collect rental income, he'll just hold on to his interest in the DST, keep getting his rent checks on the 8th of every month. If the kid that wants to sell it and go to Vegas and bet on black, he can sell his interest off in the DST, get his proceeds, pay taxes if any, go to Vegas, bet on black. The only kid that's out of luck is the one that wants to live in the property and not pay rent. Yeah. So in that Amazon distribution center that we have in Virginia, he can't go there and say, I own the bathroom on the 3rd floor. Can I move in? They're not going to let him move in. Okay. Now, it's a good insurance policy, and this is why we work with a lot of great realtors like yourself. I don't know what the market is like here, but from what I hear, you guys everyone has seen incredible real estate prices, right? All-time highs, aggressive markets. Things are not staying on the market very long. We work with a lot of residential realtors in Hawaii, as well as commercial. The residential space is crazy right now. You list a house on a Saturday, 25 people waiting in line for an open house on Sunday, and then you'll get 15 offers all above asking on Tuesday. Fantastic if you're a seller, right? But what happens in a 1031 exchange? The first half, you're the seller. Second half, you're the buyer, right? Right now, being a buyer sucks, right? So the DST, if you can imagine, think of it as a buffet line, right? Today, we got 2 different sandwiches available for you. Well, I might have 2 different DSTs available for you today, right? Which one do you want? Because we have these programs already available, because they're already closed, because they don't need to qualify for financing, we will identify and we will close a DST in 10 to 12 days. So that 45-day timeline will never affect our clients. Because as you know, in a 1031 exchange, it's easy to close in 180 days. The challenging part right now is identifying qualified property in 45. Right? We have a whole buffet line of property ready to identify well within their 45-day period. Now, the one example I'm going to show you is actually how I won over the top Cushman guy in Hawaii, because he referred me his client on day 43 out of day 45. And I prevented her from paying hundreds of thousands in taxes and actually gave her more income than she was getting on her old property. And I'll show you how we did that. Next, we'll make sure that you always eliminate your boot or your taxes. Yeah, because again, the goal is you got to buy equal to or greater than what you sell. But because the DST is deemed as like-kind property by the IRS, the DST also qualifies for the step-up in cost basis. You folks all know what that is, correct? Who doesn't know what the step-up in cost basis is? Awesome. Many people think that it was going to get abolished under this current administration, but that step-up in cost basis was removed out of the bill back in December. So it's still in play. And what that basically means is that should anyone inherit a piece of real estate or non-retirement stocks, the value or their new cost basis will be the value it was on the day of the passing. That's why you perform a date of death appraisal. Right now, of course, if they were put on title prior to passing away, they lose that step-up in cost basis. Right? It's a carry-over cost basis scenario. Okay? Now, diversification, as we talked about, DSTs come in many shapes and forms, whether that's healthcare, student housing, multifamily, which many of you know by far is probably the most resilient asset class historically, no matter what economic condition we're in. And then lastly, that blue chip office, triple net lease type things. And of course, the geographical diversification is important for many. Now, some of the basic mechanics of a DST, as I mentioned, the DST allows for up to 500 investors. Some of them have a loan, some don't. What I get a lot is that this sounds like a real estate investment trust. What is the difference? Well, a real estate investment trust does not allow for 1031 exchanges unless it's an UPREIT. You can exchange into a UPREIT, but you can't exchange out of it. Right? But I think the biggest difference between a DST and a real estate investment trust is its size. Yeah, a REIT usually consists of thousands of properties in hundreds of billions in size. Right? Example, since we're on the topic of Vegas, MGM Grand, Bellagio, Mandalay Bay. Those 3 properties actually sit in a real estate investment trust today. Did you know that? Yeah? You guys all heard of Blackstone? Blackstone runs and operates that REIT that those 3 properties are in right now. Yeah. Now, but what else is in that REIT? It's called B REIT. Yeah, Blackstone's REIT. What else is in that REIT? Maybe a strip mall in Georgia. Yeah. Now, why do they do that? Because they can mix and match risk. Yeah. You have highly irreplaceable, high credit properties, which usually hold little to no risk, especially if they sign a 30-year guaranteed lease, right? Triple net lease moving forward. You can afford to mix in some higher risk properties, right, inside of a REIT. Most investors don't know what they're buying when they buy into a REIT. Yeah, but as I mentioned, you can't 1031 in nor 1031 out of a real estate investment trust. The DST is the only securitized 1031 exchange investment that allows for a 1031 exchange in and out of it. But because a DST is 1031 exchange and qualified as replacement property, you need to have certain characteristics when you ID a replacement property, right? When you do an exchange, like physical address. Yeah. So for that reason, our DSTs are usually much smaller. It might consist of 1, 2, 3, 4 properties in there. So you know exactly what you're buying, but usually you'll find higher credit quality properties inside of these portfolios than, let's say, inside of a REIT. What else? Each DST is held in a separate trust for their investor. And as I mentioned, the minimum investment for a DST is $100,000, but it's not $100,000 blocks, right? A lot of investors get confused and they say, well, I have $150,000 left over I need to exchange. Do I need to add another $50,000 to bring it up to 200 because it only goes in increments of 100? Or do I need to take out the 50 and pay taxes on the 50? No, the DST will take everything down to the penny, which is how we ensure your clients will never pay a penny in taxes ever, because they can defer all the taxes owed all the way down to the penny. And of course, each DST, being a registered security, will go through extensive independent third-party due diligence studies. When the process or the life cycle of a DST looks something like this. The DST company goes out, works with the developer, sources the property. They'll hire an independent third-party due diligence company to write up the 600-page report and financial forecasts for the next 10 years on what these properties look to do. They then file that with the SEC. My broker-dealer, which is where I hang my securities license, is the second largest broker-dealer in the US, Advisor Group. And Advisor Group does not believe the DST company. So they hire their own independent third-party due diligence company to do the exact same thing, right? Once that passes, their investment committee then authorizes us and approves us to solicit investors for a specific program. But because I don't believe the DST company, nor I believe my broker-dealer, I have my own internal investment committee that we analyze all these deals, because we see hundreds of these things. Right now there might be 15 DSTs available. But funny enough, I'm only raising money for one, which is actually closing. It's closed already today. And I've been on the phone running frantically because our clients are calling us. Hey, I have 8 million I need to put in. Hey, I have 850,000 I need to put in. I got 150,000 I need to put in. So I need to call them. It's like, can you slide me in? Can you kick somebody out? My clients need to get into this one because I don't want to put them in the next one, right? So what I tell all of our clients is that choosing the right DST is important, but avoiding the wrong one is actually more important, because every DST will pay income. It's a matter of which DSTs will turn a profit when we sell it in 3.5 years. That's the key. Yeah. Now, our target appreciation for most of these programs are about a 4 to 5% cash on cash return. Every million invested in a DST would generate about 40 to 50,000 a year in net rental income. And then of course, real estate appreciates over time, most of the time, right? Now, our target appreciation is anywhere from 3 to 5% a year. But really what we're looking for is that when our property value appreciates by 15 to 20%, we're gonna throw it on the secondary market and sell it to an institution. Now, who would buy a $200 million Amazon distribution center from us? The largest purchasers of DSTs in the secondary markets are gonna be endowments, pension funds, insurance companies, and other real estate investment trusts. Sometimes family offices, but rarely family offices. Now, depreciation also applies to the DST, right? There's a lot of people that you might know that might own property that ran out of depreciation, right? In your guys' world, it's 39 years, right? In the commercial. Residential, 27.5. When these programs when their property runs out of depreciation, what's happening? They're paying the most amount of taxes possible on the rental income they're collecting, right? But because a DST is real estate, they might be able to restart that depreciation clock. Many times we help clients get more income before taxes And some of our programs are 100% tax deferred for the first 10 years, right? After tax, we almost double their income. Yeah. Now, how we do this is we send your clients an informational 1099. They take that 1099, give it to their CPA. CPA will itemize their income and expenses on their Schedule E, recognize the depreciation. But more importantly, as I mentioned, because the DST qualifies for like-kind property, that step-up in cost basis still applies to the DST, so that when those kids inherit that DST, they get that step-up in cost basis. This is why we're able to see so many, we call them legacy properties in Hawaii. You know, properties that might have been owned from like the 1800s, you know, from the missionary days, you know, they're selling these properties off because they can pass it now to their children, break up the LLC, let their normal kids inherit it, get the step up in cost basis. And then what should the kids do at that point? Liquidate and get out. Don't keep that tax bill going, get out of that, right? Pay little to no taxes. Yeah? So that's a great way for these legacy families to do that. As I mentioned, some DSTs come with a non-recourse loan, and those loans vary. Sometimes we have programs all cash. Sometimes we have programs that are 80% loan to value or higher. Actually, we have a DuPont chemical plant right now that's about an 83% loan to value. But most of our DSTs fall within that 50% range, right, of loan to value. What are some of the risks with a DST? What I tell our clients, the exact same risk they have right now, right? Because they're owning, at the end of the day, real estate. Whether that's natural disaster, tenant damage, environmental issues, floods, vacancies, fires, all those things and risks that apply to the current real estate still applies to the DST. But we're not gonna buy a $250 million portfolio of real estate and not insure it. That'd be crazy, right? But the one risk that is specific to the DST and not specific to the real estate they own today is the loss of control. Remember those voting rights, right? They give up those voting rights, they give up loss of control on the property. Because again, the mandate of the DST is that it needs to be managed in the best interest of all investors, not just one. What are the fees? Well, you can thank Dana for this, but if you refer clients to us, we will rebate 1% of our commission back to all your clients. Yeah, so every $1 million investor invested will get $1,010,000 into their DST, right, which will then generate an income. The 4 to 5% cash and cash return, the appreciation is after 100% of all the fees. So meaning that most people look at this, and because it's a securitized investment, they think this is like a mutual fund of some sort, right? And how mutual funds work is you invest $1 million that has a 5% sales charge, for example, only $950,000 will actually get invested, not in the DST. With a DST, your investors will make 1% right out the gate by working with you. And the cash on cash return is net of all fees. It's net of the mortgage. It's net of the property management fees, all those things. And when we sell the property, we're looking for a 15 to 20% appreciation, not on their $1 million invested, on the $1,010,000 they invested, if that makes sense, okay? So what's the life cycle of a DST? Well, the intent of every single DST is to be sold. Yeah, the intent is never to hold to a DST forever. Actually, the maximum life of a DST is 10 years. In the multifamily space, the life cycle is about 3.5 years on average. It's actually 3.4 years historically. We've never had a multifamily DST last longer than 5. The profits and the growth of the property and the equity, 100% of those growths will be returned back to your investor. For what? For them to do another 1031 exchange again. And the same rules will apply on the exchange of the DST as it would any other property, right? It's the 3% rule. You can identify up to 3 properties. 200% rule, twice the value of what they sold. They got 45 days to ID that property, 180 days to close. Many times what clients do is they take the profits or the whole thing and bring it back here to PA, and they find properties that they love. You know, maybe the market has changed a bit. Maybe it's a little better for a buyer. You know, sometimes clients take only the profits and exchange back into a DST and take the principal and invest in something else. As long as they conform with those 1031 exchange rules after the DST's life, they can do whatever they want with the proceeds. From the time we put it on the secondary market, we get an offer, your clients will be notified with about 4 to 6 months notice that we'll be selling the property. We'll tell them exactly when the closing date is. what their initial investment was, what the profit is, and more importantly, how much they need to buy in real estate on the next go around so they can defer 100% of those taxes. Now, what if your client wants to get out of the DST before we actually sell it? Yeah, I know that's a big question. How do they do that? Well, there is a way to do that, and it normally happens about 10 to 15 times a year. How we do that is, in any real estate transaction, as you know, it takes three things, right? A willing seller, a willing buyer, and an agreed upon price. If your client is in the DST, obviously they're the willing seller if they want to get out. We'll help match them with a willing buyer, which is usually somewhere in the other 499 other investors in that same program they own, right? At that point, those two guys need to have an agreed upon price. Once they do that, the transaction is done. We'll process all the paperwork and the escrow, wire their funds over to the qualified intermediary for them to do their exchange on the next go around. That usually takes about 4 to 6 months, depending how long it takes to find the buyer. As I mentioned, this happens about 10 to 15 times a year. 100% of the time we've been able to fulfill that subscription of someone wanting to sell out, if that made sense. Okay, because the last resort is that no one wants to buy it, which has never happened. But if no one ever wants to buy it, what happens? We turn it back to a national offering, and there's hundreds of advisors like me across the US. We're going to replace whatever funds we need to in that one program. That'll take us like a minute to do that. Yeah. Most DSTs now, because of the way the market is, example, we have this program right now that's oversold, $200-something million multifamily, 3 communities, as I mentioned. That 150 million or so we had to fundraise, we did that in about 2 weeks. So these programs are moving fast because a lot of investors, are looking at the DST as that way to capture the upside in the market. 99% of my business comes from people who never wanted to sell their property, believe it or not. Yeah, they get referred to me from someone like you, and my job is to show them the DST and why they might want to sell, right, to get you guys the listing. That's how we've been working closely with the Cushman guy out here and the Cushman guy in Hawaii. Okay, now, what are some ways that you can actually use the DST, right? Well, this is the perfect example of the one I was talking about for the Cushman guy in Hawaii and how we first met. So about 5 years ago, I was in the Honolulu Cushman office doing a presentation just like this one. And then one of the guys working there tells his client to call me because this is what was going on. She sold a $6.75 million apartment building, which she bought for $3 million. She had a mortgage of $1 million, and she's taken $1 million of depreciation over the lifetime that she owned the property. But it was her retirement plan. So it's generating her $130,000 a year in rental income. But the building was older, is aging, required a lot of maintenance, too much upkeep. And because she was sick, she wanted to leave something easier for her daughter to manage. So she sold the property. She worked with this realtor at Cushman, sold the apartment building, and told the Cushman realtor, find me a replacement. She found this apartment building she loved for $4.5 million. Bought it all cash with the proceeds. But what's the problem? The problem is that she sold 6.75 and she bought 4.5 in real estate. Do you have a laser pointer? What's that? Bottom green. Ah, there. Okay. Ooh, that's awesome. All right. So she sold 6.75 million, right? With a 5.75 million in equity, $1 million mortgage, but 130,000 in income. She then bought this property, 4.5 million. She bought it all cash. So what's the issue? She sold 6.75, bought 4.5. She needs to buy 2.25 million in real estate to defer 100% of the taxes. Okay? But what's the problem? Because of that $1 million mortgage, she only has 1.25 million in equity left. Right? She calls me on day 43, right? Well, she came to my office on day 43, yeah, and tells me, my realtor told me you can help me because I need to buy some more real estate. I don't want to get another mortgage, and I don't like Donald Trump, and I don't want to pay him a penny in taxes. And he told me you can do this because I only have 2 days left. So can you help me, please? I said, yep, we can. I actually have a multifamily DST that has a 50% loan to value that comes in the form of a non-recourse loan, right? So what happens? She 1031 exchanges her 1.25 million into a DST that has a 50% loan to value that she doesn't need to qualify for and legally cannot be held liable for it. 50% loan to value means we add 1.25 million in a non-recourse loan. She buys 2.5 million in real estate in the DST. Let's do some simple math. Bought 4.5 in the first apartment building, bought 2.5 in the DST. She buys 7 million of real estate. She bought more real estate than she sold, right? There's no taxes owed on that. Okay, and her DST is paying her 5% cash on cash return, right? Which is $62,000 a year in income. Between her new apartment building and the DST, she's getting $162,000 in income, right? And we did this with 2 days to spare. Now, the rule of the story is don't send your clients to me on day 43, right? The rule of the story is we can mix and match the DST, and it's a great way to catch any leftover funds that your client might have from doing an exchange. We can design the exchange properly where if they have a mortgage like this, we can actually just replace the mortgage. They can be debt-free, right? Use the non-recourse loan, but still defer 100% of the taxes, okay? Now, what's another example? This client of mine is a senator in Hawaii, and basically she was put on title of the property she grew up in 1990. In the early 2000s, her mom passed away. She then turned it into an investment property, but she took a $200,000 home equity line on it to buy the condo that she actually lives in now. After that expense of the mortgage and her rental income, this is the kind of cap rates we have in Hawaii. She nets out $200 a month on this property. Okay. Now, she needs to fix the roof. You can imagine this property was built in like the 50s, and she needs to fix the roof. To repair the roof is going to cost $50,000 to repair the roof. And she's netting out $2,400 a year. Doing some simple math, how many years does it take her to pay off the roof? 20 plus years? Yeah, and she's 72. So when will she see her first penny of profit? 93, maybe? Is that a good investment for her? Horrible, right? But what's the problem? The problem was that she was put on title before the mom passed, right? So her cost basis was the value of the property that her mom paid for it, 30 grand, minus depreciation, because it's a rental property. So what's her cost basis? Almost nothing. And she sold it for 1.1 million. What's her capital gains tax? Enormous, right? She had to do a 1031 exchange. So what we did was we 1031 exchanged her proceeds of $900,000 into a Delaware Statutory Trust with a 50% loan to value, right? She adds on $900,000 in a non-recourse loan. She buys 1.8 million in real estate. She bought more than she sold. Her income now, the DST, is $45,000 a year versus her $2,400 a year. She doesn't need to manage property. We sold the property as is. We didn't fix the roof. She could have got more. She fixed it, but didn't make sense, right? I matched her with my other client who actually bought it. Thank God, he's the president of this huge construction company on Oahu, and he actually had to fix not only the roof, but everything else underneath it. You know, he basically built a whole brand new house because it was so old, you know, and it needed so much repair. This is a great way for your clients that own property. Couple ways. Number one, deferred maintenance, right? And they're not willing to fix it, you know, or they don't want to fix it because the numbers don't work out if they do, right? But number two, you notice how she sells a property here for 1.1 million, but she buys 1.8 million in real estate. What does that mean? We increased her depreciated value, right? So the value that she can depreciate now annually is bigger because she bought way more real estate than she sold. So what did we do? Decrease the taxes that's owed on the rental income. So your clients that are running out of their depreciation schedule, worried about their taxes are going to jump up, it's a great way for them to defer their taxes or lessen the taxes owed on the rental income. Okay, now here's the last one. And this is another Cushman case that we worked with. This particular client bought an apartment building in Honolulu from his dad for 100 grand. You guys ever heard of, did you folks do Medicaid planning out here? No? Where people give their assets away or sell it to their kids for super cheap so that they look poor, so that if they ever needed care, they can qualify for Medicaid. You guys ever heard of that stuff? It's big out in Hawaii. Why? Because the biggest asset that most people have in Hawaii is real estate. They don't want liens and they don't want Medicaid to come after their family home, which they've held in for generations. They want to leave that for their children. So they do Medicaid planning. But what does that mean? You give your assets away, right? And you lose that step up in cost basis, or you have a very low cost basis because you bought it for cheap, right? So in this case, he bought this apartment building for 100 grand from his parents in the 90s. Fast forward today, he was told he can sell it for 2.8 million. Sounds really good, right? Cost basis 100, there's no mortgage, taking depreciation of 30 grand, and this is generating 74,000 a year in rental income for him. His plan was he was going to take 400,000 out at closing. You all know what happens when you take cash out at closing, right? You pay taxes, right? But back then, capital gains rate was 10% on the federal level. Now, you guys here, you guys pay 3% state capital gains, even if you do a 1031 exchange, right? It doesn't matter. If you sell any piece of property and you do a 1031 exchange, you're still going to pay 3% in taxes. Correct? Right? Because I've done enough deals with our Cushman guy out here to kind of learn that. But what is interesting in Hawaii, our capital gains rate is 7.25%. Yeah, but we can defer it. So if we did an exchange, we would defer the 7.25%. Okay, but this guy wants to take 400,000 out. He's thinking he's only going to pay 10% in taxes. He'll net out 360, and he wants to go buy a house in Las Vegas. Hawaii people love Las Vegas, by the way. They call it the ninth island in Las Vegas. It's crazy. And you want to feel like you're in Hawaii, but don't go there. Go to downtown Las Vegas. You'll see people that look like me walking all over the place. And you can get spam musubis. You guys know what a spam musubi is? You get spam musubis in downtown Las Vegas. So he wants to buy a house in Las Vegas, okay? And then basically let his daughter live in it while she goes to college at UNLV, right? His intent is after 4 years of college, he'll sell that house, pay little to no taxes, only on the appreciation that it had for 4 years. He's going to take that proceeds and then pay off his mortgage. But what's the problem? His mom tried to do the same thing the year previous. And on April 15th, she needed to pay about $150,000 in taxes. So when he came to me, he said, I think our CPA screwed up. Can you look at my mom's tax return? Because I think he did something wrong because she's paying too much in taxes. It's supposed to only be $40,000 in taxes, 10%. But what do most people not calculate? The depreciation recapture, right? All the depreciation he's taken is 25% of that, right? He needs to recognize the 7.25% Hawaii, and then 15% federal. Now it's going to be close to 25% federal. And depending on how much money you make, an additional 3.8 Medicare surtax or net investment income tax is added to that. So I said, no, your mom actually had to pay $150,000 in taxes. So he's like, man, that sucks. I'm not going to sell the property then. I go, why wouldn't you sell though? He's like, cause I can't buy the place in Vegas like I wanted to, and I can't pay off my mortgage with the proceeds. I said, well, what if I showed you a way that you could, right? So this goes to our example, how you take money out or you can touch your gains tax-free. If you could show your client a way to access their gains in their real estate investment tax-free, do you think they'd be interested in listening to you? They might be, right? We're working on a deal right now here in PA, thinking he can sell this property for 11 million, and I'm showing him a way to get 4 million out of the property tax-free. You think he'd want to listen? Probably, right? So what happened? Before he lists the property, I told him to go work with a local bank and pull out $800,000, whether that's in the form of a cash out refinance, a home equity line, or a combination of the two. If you can do it all on the line of credit, that's even better, okay? So before we list the property, we take out this $800,000 HELOC. Then we list it on the MLS, okay? Once we get offers, he then writes himself a check from the $800,000, throws it in his bank account, goes buy that house in Las Vegas, pays off his mortgage. Okay. We then sell the property, go through escrow. We sell for $2.8 million. The $800,000 mortgage is paid off. We're left with $2 million of proceeds, right? You guys all follow me? Yep. We 1031 exchange into a DST that has a 50% loan to value. We participate in $2 million of a non-recourse loan that he doesn't need to qualify for nor is liable for. We sold 2.8. We buy $4 million in real estate. Did we buy more real estate than he sold? Are there any taxes? No. The DST pays him $100,000 a year, more than he's getting now. But because the $800,000 was taken out prior to closing using a debt instrument, and because we replaced more real estate than he sold, the $800,000 is tax-free. Right? Now at a 5% cash-on-cash return, right, his $800,000 would generate $40,000 a year in rental income, right? But at a 5% cash-on-cash return at $40,000 a year, I gave him 20 years of rent upfront tax-free. Right? So if I tell our clients, if I had a way to give you 20 years of rent upfront tax-free, and I had this tenant who'd sign that lease right now, would you do it? I'm like, yeah, give me the tenant. Right? Well, I got another way. We can do it this way. Right? And what happens? He still has $4 million of real estate working for him. Right? Because what's step number 2? Step number 2 is that we're going to sell the DST at an appreciated price, right? Okay. So if this thing goes up by 10%, we sell this interest off at $4.4 million. All of our loans are guaranteed fixed interest, 10 years, interest-only payments. What does that mean? Our loan balance is always $2 million. $4.4 million sales price, $2 million mortgage. When we sell, we're left with $2.4 million in equity, right? That's not a 10%, that's a 10% property value appreciation, but a 20% return on investment. Yeah. You guys all know how to use leverage in a mortgage in real estate, right? Because equity grows on both. It's a great way for them to get the money, keep working for them. So to sum up, as you can see, whether they're eliminating their mortgage, increasing their cap rate, improving tax efficiencies, simplifying their life, right? Or providing a more tax, risk, and fair estate plan, which actually that's a lot of reasons why we've been doing a lot of business out here for the estate planning side. But of course, more importantly, deferring 100% of those taxes, the DST is an option. I'm going to hang around for questions, I guess, or yes? And I know this is going to sound crazy, okay? But in the last 9 years, yeah, that I've done this, and probably over 1,000 transactions already that we've done, I have not had one client seen their income decrease or loss principal of investment on their DST with us. No, we're selling their real estate off. Oh, I see. So what you're saying is, if someone, yeah, no, you can't 1031 exchange partnerships. However, you can use other vehicles to offset the tax. Yeah. Yes, sir. 100,000.
I have a question from the audience. Hi, can you use a DST to invest funds from a self-directed real estate IRA?
No. Qualified proceeds are not allowed in DSTs. Yeah. Good question, though. I forgot, we got people virtually. Yeah. Like, how are you guys doing that?
Can you explain the rules around boot and DST?
Boot is just another term for capital gains tax. And the DST is recognized as like-kind property under Internal Revenue Code 2004-86 to be treated as like-kind property so you can continue to defer that boot. Did that answer the question?
It's a virtual, so they can
Yeah,
respond.
so maybe they can comment after if I didn't answer that
Okay.
well enough. Yes. Mhm. Yes, you can put cash well, not tax-free per se, right? The Opportunity Zone shelter is 90% of the gains if held to year 10, right? So you can put after-tax dollars into a DST. You can't 1031 exchange and defer all the taxes on the remaining 10 into the DST. Yes. Op zones, right? You're talking about. Yeah, yeah, yes. So it still is not tax-free, right? It's tax-deferred, yeah, in those programs. But again, 1031 exchanges with the DST, it can only accept to defer the tax. Needs to be 1031 exchange qualified funds, right? In any transaction, because it's no different. What I tell our clients is just imagine the DST is no different than an apartment building. It's the same thing. The only difference is the structure, right, and how it's titled and held. Mm-hmm. Questions? Anyone? No other questions? No? Awesome. All right, I'm going to hang around. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Troy. Question you weren't asked is what are spam and sooties? So,
Oh yeah, it's a local favorite. Like canned spam.
yeah.
They make it in a local delicacy where you slice sear it, cook it, and put it over steamed rice and sushi. That sounds appetizing. Don't knock it till you try it.
Well, thank you again, Troy. Very much appreciated. We're looking for excited to start the reciprocity program with your office and get out to Hawaii sometime soon. On behalf of SIOR and CCIM, we're very grateful for you sharing your time, expertise, and insights with us. Very interesting topic. Also like to thank Dana Grau for being the impetus behind today's program, as well as Dominic. Dana, thank you. Dana coordinated with Troy and his team to make this event happen, so thank you again. And congratulations on officially becoming an SIOR last week. Before we close it out, Troy was gracious enough to donate a $100 Amazon gift card. And so pick one out of here, dig deep. And we have Matt Carl, Myron Kovic and Scott. Congratulations. Thank you all for attending today. Stay tuned for your emails for more information about the upcoming SIOR of Western Pennsylvania events. And our next event will be the Top Deal Awards here, March 24th. We hope to see you there. Enjoy the rest of your day.